You won't believe what just happened on live TV. Jasmine Crockett snapped after Candace Owens dropped a truth bomb that left the whole room stunned. Was it truth or pure provocation? What you're about to see has the internet on fire. Let's break it down. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. It started like any other political debate. Sharp opinions, intense body language, and the kind of fiery exchanges we've come to expect when two powerhouse personalities collide. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a rising star in the Democratic Party known for her no-nonsense attitude and passionate advocacy, was seated across from Candace Owens, the ever-unapologetic conservative commentator and political firebrand who's made a career out of shaking the table. From the moment the cameras started rolling, you could feel the tension. The smiles were polite, but you could tell each woman came prepared to defend their corner and challenge the other. The topic of the night: race in American politics, and who's really delivering for the black community. Then, out of nowhere, everything changed. What started as a routine exchange of views quickly turned into one of the most explosive moments in recent live television. And it all came down to a single shocking statement. Candace Owens, never one to hold back, leaned forward, looked directly at Jasmine Crockett, and then straight into the camera, and dropped a truth bomb that sent shockwaves across the room. "Let's be honest," she said, her voice calm but cutting. "Democrats have built their entire political platform on the pain of black Americans, while delivering nothing in return. You talk a good game about justice and equality, but the results speak for themselves. Where is the progress?" It wasn't just the words that hit hard. It was the tone, cold, clinical, and completely unbothered. The audience gasped, even the moderator looked stunned. For a second, the room fell silent. Then it happened. You could see it on Jasmine Crockett's face, the way her jaw clenched, the way her eyes narrowed. The moment Candace's words hit, it was as if a switch flipped inside her. Crockett sat up straighter, her entire posture stiffening. Her lips parted slightly, as if she was still deciding whether to fire back immediately or take a deep breath and hold her ground. But it was too late. The damage had been done. Candace continued, seemingly unfazed by the tension she had just created. "We've got decades of broken promises, rising crime, poor schools, and no economic opportunity. Who's been in charge in those cities? Democrats. And who's been speaking on behalf of those communities? People like you, Congresswoman Crockett. And yet, nothing's changed. Boom, that was it. That was the spark." Jasmine Crockett exploded, not in a reckless, screaming kind of way, but in the fierce, fire-in-the-eyes kind of way that says, "You just crossed the line." She shot back with force. "You don't get to come in here and lecture me about what my community needs. You don't live our struggle, you don't walk our streets, and you don't understand what we're fighting for. What you do is sit in front of cameras and pander to people who already hate us. That's not empowerment. That's exploitation." The room was now fully engulfed in the heat of the moment, and viewers across the country were glued to their screens, watching this live political clash unfold in real time. What made it so powerful wasn't just the drama, it was the symbolism. On one side, a black conservative woman challenging the mainstream narrative, armed with numbers, strategy, and cold critiques. On the other, a progressive black congresswoman defending her people, her party, and her passion with everything she had. The energy was electric. Candace Owens didn't flinch. She simply tilted her head and replied with a smirk, "That's the problem. You're more offended by what I'm saying than by what's actually happening in the communities you claim to protect." That line cut deep. Jasmine Crockett, visibly shaking with emotion, responded, "You're not a truth teller. You're a puppet, a mouthpiece for people who benefit from keeping us divided." And that was the moment social media lit up. People started clipping the footage, sharing quotes, and choosing sides. For some, Candace Owens was a hero for saying what no one else would say. For others, Jasmine Crockett was the voice of righteous resistance, refusing to let anyone silence her or misrepresent her people. This wasn't just a political disagreement. This was a cultural reckoning, broadcast live, with two women from the same community standing on opposite sides of the battlefield, fighting for very different visions of truth. And while the segment eventually moved on, the impact was immediate and unforgettable. It was the kind of moment that makes live television unforgettable. No scripts, no filters, just raw political energy, ready to ignite. Millions were watching when Candace Owens, known for her fearlessness and unapologetic conservative stance, leaned forward with that signature calmness and delivered a line that made time seem to stop. Democrats, she began, have built their entire political platform on using black pain as political capital, while delivering very little in return. The words hit the air with the weight of a sledgehammer. The room fell into a momentary silence. Even the moderator looked unsure of how to respond. But Candace didn't stop there. She turned, ever so slightly, toward Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, locking eyes as she delivered her next verbal strike. You stand in front of cameras, talking about justice, talking about equity, but where are the results? Where's the change? Because from where I'm standing, your communities are worse off today than they were 10 years ago. You could hear a pin drop. Owens wasn't just offering an opinion, she was making an accusation, an indictment, a claim that Crockett and other progressive black leaders weren't just failing their communities, they were profiting off their struggles, using systemic pain as leverage to win votes without delivering meaningful progress. And Candace came, loaded with receipts. She cited statistics, rising crime rates in inner-city neighborhoods, underfunded schools, skyrocketing homelessness, and unemployment numbers that showed little improvement despite years of promises. She named cities like Baltimore, Detroit, and Chicago, where Democratic leadership had been dominant for decades, but many black communities still struggled with poverty, violence, and lack of opportunity. Candace looked back at the camera and spoke with icy precision. The truth is, if your policies worked, your communities wouldn't be in chaos. If you really cared about change, you'd hold your own party accountable. This wasn't a random rant. It was a deliberate and strategic call-out, aimed at exposing what Candace described as a cycle of performative politics, loud speeches, passionate sound bites, but no real transformation on the ground. And that's when it happened. The camera cut to Jasmine Crockett, and it was clear that something had changed. Her smile had vanished. Her body, once relaxed in the chair, was now stiff and upright. Her eyes, wide with a mix of disbelief and fury, locked onto Candace. In that instant, viewers across the country could see what was coming. A political explosion. Jasmine's voice, when it came, was sharp and emotional. "How dare you?" she began, her tone trembling with controlled rage. "You sit here and criticize people who are in the trenches, doing the work, standing with our communities every single day. You act like you care about us, but all you do is provide talking points for people who don't even believe in our struggle." But Candace was unshaken. She sat back, arms crossed, eyes unwavering, like someone who had expected this exact reaction. Jasmine wasn't done. "You think quoting statistics makes you an expert? You don't represent the people you're talking about. You've never stood on a protest line. You've never had to fight for housing, or health care, or racial justice. You make money, undermining our fight." Her voice was rising now, the heat building with every word. Viewers could feel the fire through the screen. Jasmine was no longer debating. She was defending herself, her values, her community. And it was personal. Candace, ever the provocateur, responded with the same calm that made her statement sting even more. "You're more angry at me for pointing it out than you are at the results you've helped produce." That line, that one line, was like gasoline on an already burning fire. Jasmine Crockett stood her ground, but her frustration was boiling over. She accused Owens of being a puppet, a performer, someone who weaponized black issues for conservative clout and white validation. And while many in the audience applauded her passion, others wondered if she was dodging the very real criticism Candace had laid out. Because underneath all the shouting, the statistics were still sitting there, uncomfortable, undeniable, and unanswered. That's what made the moment so powerful. It wasn't just about political ideologies. It was about two very different visions for the future of Black America. One that believed in fighting from within the system. Another that believed the system had already failed, and it was time to call it out, no matter the backlash. Candace's statement didn't just trigger Crockett. It challenged the entire political status quo, and in doing so, it ignited a national debate that stretched far beyond that studio. It reached into homes, headlines, and hashtags, because no matter what side you're on, one thing was clear. Candace Owens said what many were too afraid to say, and Jasmine Crockett wasn't about to let it go unchallenged. First of all, with why. Those two words, Jasmine Crockett launched what would become one of the most talked about moments on live television. The air was already thick with tension, but when Crockett leaned forward and spoke, it wasn't just a response. It was a declaration. I'm T. Not here to play respectability politics. You don't speak for me. You don't speak for the Black community. Her voice trembled, but it wasn't with fear. It was pure, unapologetic fury. You could hear it in her tone. The weight of frustration, the sting of years spent fighting, uphill political battles, and the exhaustion of being dismissed by people who didn't walk in her shoes. Crockett was visibly shaking now, not because she was unraveling, but because she was pouring every ounce of emotion into her words. She accused Candace Owens of using inflammatory language to divide, not uplift. According to Crockett, Candace's sharp criticisms weren't about accountability or empowerment. They were about self-promotion, about feeding controversy for clicks, follows, and conservative approval. What you do is sell outrage disguised as insight. You throw grenades and walk away while the rest of us are left picking up the pieces in our communities. It was powerful, it was passionate, and it was deeply personal. But the drama didn't end there. In fact, it was just getting started. Candace Owens, sitting cool and composed with that trademark calmness that both infuriates and impresses her critics, didn't flinch. She didn't interrupt. She didn't raise her voice. She simply waited, letting Crockett unload. And when Jasmine finished, Candace smiled, a knowing, almost smug smile, and delivered a line so cutting, so precise, it felt like a dagger straight to the heart of the debate. That's exactly the problem. You're more outraged by my words than by the actual problems in your communities. Oof! You could feel the impact through the screen. It wasn't just a clapback. It was a philosophical gut punch, accusing Crockett of focusing on rhetoric over results, of fighting symbolic battles while real-world issues, poverty, crime, broken education systems were still destroying lives every day. The studio was stunned. The audience? Silent. Social media? Already lighting up. Crockett paused for a beat, visibly shaken by the sting of Candace's remark. But it didn't take long for her to regain her fire. She leaned back in, eyes blazing, and fired off a line that would go viral within minutes. You're a mouthpiece for white supremacy and blackface. Boom. Those words hit like a thunderclap. Shocking, emotional, and immediately controversial. The studio erupted. Some gasped, others clapped. On social media, it was chaos. Hashtags like Candace vs. Crockett, blackface comment, and live TV meltdown began trending almost instantly. YouTubers were already prepping reaction videos. Pundits from both sides scrambled to weigh in. Some praised Crockett for her boldness, calling her the only one willing to say what many had felt for years, that Candace Owens wasn't challenging the system. She was reinforcing it from within, wrapped in a brand of conservatism that alienated more than it inspired. Others were stunned by the comment, calling it racist, unprofessional, and damaging to civil discourse. They argued that Crockett had crossed a line, turning what could have been a substantive debate into a name-calling spectacle. But regardless of which side people were on, one thing was certain. This moment had hit a nerve, a deep one. It wasn't just about Candace Owens or Jasmine Crockett anymore. It was about the identity crisis within Black political thought, about whether criticism from within the community is betrayal or necessary evolution, about whether passion without results is enough, and whether cold, clinical logic without empathy can lead to real progress. This exchange exposed just how divided the conversation has become, not between black and white or left and right, but within the very heart of Black America itself. And even though the debate eventually moved on, the echoes of that moment lingered. The viral clips continued to spread. Memes popped up overnight. Commentators dissected every facial expression. Political talk shows ran the segment on repeat. People were watching, analyzing, reacting, and most importantly, choosing sides. For some, Jasmine Crockett was a hero, unfiltered, unafraid, unwilling to let someone twist the narrative about her community. For others, Candace Owens was the truth teller, fearless in calling out hypocrisy, even if it meant standing alone. But no matter where you stood, you couldn't deny what had happened. Two powerful voices clashed on live TV, and they shook the nation in the process. As expected, the clip spread like wildfire. Within hours of the confrontation between Jasmine Crockett and Candace Owens, the internet was ablaze. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube lit up with hashtags like #Crockett vs. Candace, Candace Owens exposed, Jasmine snaps, and Black politics unfiltered. People weren't just watching, they were taking sides. Clips of the exchange flooded timelines. Spliced into reaction videos, meme compilations, political commentary, and fan edits with dramatic music and slow-motion zooms. The clip of Crockett saying, "You're a mouthpiece for white supremacy and blackface," became an instant soundbite, used in reels, parodies, and serious debate alike. Meanwhile, Candace Owens' calm, surgical takedown, especially her now viral line, "You're more outraged by my words than by the actual problems in your communities," was being shared across conservative spaces as the ultimate mic drop moment. The internet didn't just watch the moment, it amplified it. The media takes over within 24 hours. Every major media outlet had picked up the story. Conservative platforms like Fox News, The Daily Wire, and Newsmax called the moment a complete meltdown by Jasmine Crockett. Headlines read, "Crockett cracks on live TV after Candace Owens drops the truth. Candace Owens dismantles Democrat talking points in under 3 minutes." They praised Candace as the voice of reason in a storm of emotional overreaction. Pundits applauded her poise, her stats, her refusal to back down. Meanwhile, progressive outlets like MSNBC, The Root, and The Griot took the opposite view. They called Candace's comments condescending, calculated gaslighting, and a betrayal of the Black experience. One op-ed headline read, "Candace Owens isn't empowering Black voices, she's echoing the system." They praised Crockett for standing her ground, speaking truth to power, and refusing to let her identity be hijacked by conservative narratives. Both women had their defenders and their critics, but here's the twist. They both won in the court of public attention. Candace's numbers saw Candace Owens, already a media-savvy personality with a massive platform, saw a spike in followers, engagement, and media bookings. Her social media feeds were flooded with messages of support from conservative followers, libertarians, and even some moderates who said they hadn't seen anyone challenge the Democrats like that before. Her YouTube channel gained thousands of new subscribers within 48 hours. Conservative influencers reposted the clip, praising her for saying what no one else dares to say. The moment cemented her reputation as a fearless voice willing to stand alone. Crockett's star rises, but Jasmine Crockett wasn't losing ground, far from it. Her fiery response, emotional delivery, and unwavering stance struck a chord with progressive voters, grassroots activists, and members of the younger generation. Many felt she embodied the frustration and exhaustion of fighting injustice while being constantly questioned or undermined. Progressive circles rallied around her. Civil rights leaders praised her authenticity. Activists used her speech in posts about Black empowerment and systemic neglect. Even celebrities chimed in, some calling her the voice we need in Congress right now. Donations to her campaign surged. Interview requests rolled in. Overnight, Crockett went from rising political figure to a symbol of resistance against performative conservatism. The bigger conversation, but perhaps the most fascinating part, wasn't just the drama or the virality, it was what came next. The exchange sparked a national conversation. People weren't just arguing about who won the debate, they were asking deeper questions. What does real progress in Black communities actually look like? Who gets to speak for Black America? Is internal criticism healthy or destructive? Has the Democratic Party taken Black voters for granted? Is Candace Owens raising real issues or simply being provocative for clout? Twitter Spaces, Clubhouse rooms, and YouTube live streams became battlegrounds for these discussions. Experts, activists, and everyday people debated the implications of that single moment, recognizing it wasn't just about two women yelling on TV. It was about the ideological civil war happening within modern Black political thought. In a way, Crockett and Owens became avatars for opposing visions. One side, grounded in traditional progressive values, fighting injustice from within the system. The other, defiant against the system itself, questioning long-held alliances and pushing for ideological independence. And the public? They were listening. Because beyond the insults, the stats, and the sound bites, that debate forced people to reflect on party loyalty, on identity, and on what leadership should really look like. Beyond the shouting match, beyond the memes, beyond the viral clips that raced across every corner of the internet, this moment between Candace Owens and Jasmine Crockett revealed something far deeper than just another political skirmish. It wasn't just drama for the cameras. It wasn't just two Black women clashing on national TV. It was a symbol, a reflection of something much bigger. Because what we saw in that explosive exchange was a spotlight on the core of America's ongoing political and cultural reckoning, especially when it comes to race, leadership, and what true progress actually means for marginalized communities. Two leaders, two visions, one big question. On one end of the spectrum stands Candace Owens, fiercely independent, unapologetically conservative, and willing to challenge not just political opponents, but her own community. Her philosophy is simple: personal responsibility over victimhood, free thought over groupthink, and critique as a form of love, even if that love is tough to receive. To her followers, Candace is a truth teller, someone unafraid to say what others won't. They see her as a disruptor, willing to call out corruption, complacency, and hypocrisy wherever it exists, even if it means becoming a lightning rod in the process. But to her critics, Candace represents something else entirely. They see her as a provocateur who weaponizes conservative talking points against her own community. Someone who downplays systemic oppression while gaining clout in predominantly white, conservative spaces. Now contrast that with Jasmine Crockett, a Democratic congresswoman grounded in the belief that change comes through collective action, community advocacy, and bold progressive policies aimed at dismantling centuries of inequality. She represents the voice of many who believe that racism isn't just a relic of the past. It's baked into the institutions we interact with daily. To her supporters, Jasmine is a fighter, a passionate advocate who speaks not just for herself, but for generations who've been silenced or ignored. Her fire, her emotion, it's not weakness, it's lived experience. But to her detractors, Crockett's brand of politics is performative. Too focused on identity, too quick to play defense rather than offering clear solutions. They argue that passion without tangible results becomes noise in the political echo chamber. This wasn't just a debate. It was a crossroads. The Candace versus Crockett moment wasn't just a disagreement. It was a collision of two philosophies, two strategies, and two futures for how to address the issues that continue to impact Black Americans. And that's what made it so uncomfortable, so captivating, so unforgettable, because it forced viewers, no matter their background, to confront a hard question. Can the Black community move forward if its own leaders can't even agree on what forward looks like? It's a question many don't want to answer. Because it means digging into hard truths. It means admitting that representation isn't the same as unity, that skin color doesn't equal shared ideology, and that having a seat at the table doesn't always mean everyone at that table wants the same meal. We like our political narratives clean, simple, good guy versus bad guy. But this moment didn't give us that luxury. It forced us to see the complexity, the uncomfortable gift of conflict. What Candace and Jasmine gave us, intentionally or not, was a moment of clarity wrapped in conflict. Yes, it was tense. Yes, it was personal. But it was also honest, raw, revealing. It highlighted how deep the divide runs not just between political parties, but within communities, within movements, even within families. How some believe the path forward is paved with self-reliance and tough love, while others believe it requires systemic overhaul and solidarity. And maybe, just maybe, both are necessary. Maybe what this moment showed us isn't that one side is right and the other is wrong. Maybe it showed us that the future depends on leaders who can fight hard, but also listen harder. On communities that can challenge each other without tearing each other down. On movements that can disagree without self-destructing. No easy answers, just the right questions in the end. This face-off didn't offer a resolution. There was no apology, no handshake, no consensus. But what it did offer was more powerful than that. It forced people to think, to step back from the slogans and sound bites, to question what progress really means, and who gets to define it. And maybe that's the point. Progress doesn't always come dressed in unity. Sometimes it comes in the form of a confrontation that rattles us out of our echo chambers. Sometimes it looks like two leaders arguing on live television, because underneath that chaos, there's a conversation we've needed to have for a long time. So whether you're Team Crockett, Team Candace, or just trying to figure it all out, this moment reminded us of one thing. The path to progress isn't always pretty, but it always starts with being brave enough to ask the hard questions. In the end, Jasmine Crockett and Candace Owens gave the nation more than just viral content. They gave us a wake-up call. Whether you agreed with Candace's criticisms or Jasmine's passionate defense, one thing is certain. This moment will be remembered for a long time. Politics isn't just about policies, it's about power, perspective, and who controls the narrative. And in this case, both women fought hard to own it. Let us know in the comments, whose side are you on, and why? And if you want more real, raw breakdowns like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that matters.